Chodesh Tov Rabotai. Writes the Gaon of Vilna that the purpose of Rosh Chodesh is that a person gets a Tosefet Neshama, an extra Neshama. Why is that? For the purpose of what? That he should make Chidushim in Torah, novel ideas in Torah. So we're going to say a nice novel idea from the Zohar Kadosh. The question is like this. It says in the Gemara, Masechet Yoma, Tractate Yoma, Chavtet Amud Aleph, which is 29a. It says over there that sinful thoughts are actually worse than the deed itself, than the sin itself. They're even more difficult. Writes Rashi over there, what's the reason for that? So he says that when a person thinks sinful thoughts, it weakens his body. What does that mean? He's thinking about some illicit relations with a woman, God forbid. So if he's thinking about things like this weakens the body more than actually doing the deed itself with that woman. That's the idea. That's what Rashi says. But the truth is, there's something deeper over here that a person doesn't understand. Why is it that sinful thoughts, are even worse than the deed itself? It should be just the other way around, right? If you actually do the deed, this is really the sin itself, the essence of the sin. But if you just think about it, you didn't really do anything at all. So then why should the thought be so severe, or even be more severe than the deed itself? It's really a very interesting question. So what's the answer? The answer is that we know, right, that the holiest place that a person has in his body is the brain. What does that mean? That the way a person thinks, right, those thoughts that he has in his mind, those are what really define what his neshama is, or the essence of his neshama. Because the neshama is more concentrated in the brain than any other place in the body, as well as the heart. Right, the heart is also, there's a lot of thought process going on there as well. So therefore, right, the person has to be careful about what he thinks, because those are the holiest elements of a person's neshama, of his essence, of his spiritual essence. This is why the deed is not as bad actually as the thought, because the thought is in a higher level, which is the thought pattern, right? That's a higher level than the deed, which is something physical that you do physically with your body. This is a higher level of sin. Sinful thought is a higher level because it gets into the brain, which is where the concentration of the neshama is, the soul. Interesting, right? We find in Zohar Kadosh, Parshat Vayetzeh, over there, it brings down some very deep things about this idea. To explain even further, right, to go deeper into this issue, why sinful thoughts are so bad. So it says over there, the Zohar Kadosh, be very, very careful about sinful thoughts. You know why? Because if you have sinful thoughts, what happens is that a person destroys his neshama like this. What does that mean? Several things happen to him. Number one is that he uproots his neshama from its source, its spiritual source in Shemaim, in the heavens. And this causes him damage because he doesn't get the source of his shefa, of his abundance anymore that he used to get. It gets cut off. So therefore, he doesn't have any more abundance coming from the side of Kedusha, from the side of holiness. Now he gets connected to what? The side of evil. And the abundance comes from there, right? So he's like living like a goy. Can you imagine? A person who has bad thoughts, he's turning his neshama, right, plugging out from the side of good and plugging in to the side of evil. That's what he does. He's connecting with the side of evil. So this is a very severe thing. But besides that, it says Zohar Kadosh something even more severe. It says over there that when a person has bad thoughts, also what happens is that his neshama, he loses his neshama eventually. What happens is that now they take away his holy neshama and comes a neshama from the sitra achra, from the evil side, and takes its place. Can you imagine? So a person, by having evil thoughts like this, having sinful thoughts, actually what he does is he uproots his own essence, the neshama, the holiness, right, the holy nature of his neshama gets totally uprooted and switched, like totally altered. So this is a very, very dangerous thing, right? It says over there also that a person who does this, lives this way, eventually what happens is that he won't rise for the Chet HaMetim, right? When the dead are resurrected, he will not rise with them. You know why? Because a person who disconnects himself like that with these evil thoughts, what happens is that he totally gets disconnected altogether, and therefore, right, when it comes to the resurrection, he has no share in that anymore, because the resurrection is only for the people who are connected to the good, to the side of good somehow, somewhat, in some manner, right? Some more than others, as we know. But the truth is, right, that a person who's engaged in evil thoughts. So we see, by the way, from here what that the saying of the Gemara of the Talmud that evil thoughts, sinful thoughts, are even worse than the deed itself. Right? There's something actually very, very deep there. As it says in the Gaon of Vilna, that a person doesn't really understand the Talmud until he learns the Zohar Kadosh. When he learns Zohar Kadosh, he starts to understand what the Talmud is talking about. Otherwise, the Talmud is like, it's hidden. It's not clear, right? Undefined. This is the way it is, right, in the Talmud. What does that mean? Bad thoughts are worse than the deed itself. You have to understand what that means. So here, right, we see that it's very, very severe. Adds Zohar Kadosh something even deeper over there, right? Some other element as well. That what happens is that when a person, right, we know that there is something called B'nai Temurah. What does that mean? That a person can live with his wife, and there comes out bad children from there, from bad souls. Why is that? Because he didn't live with her properly. So one of the things that they say, right, that causes a great deal of damage is that when a person has relations with his wife, but he's thinking about a different woman, right? So here also we have the problem with the thoughts. He has bad thoughts, he has sinful thoughts, he has thoughts about being with a different woman, which is sinful, right? Because he's not allowed to be with that woman. He's only allowed to be with his wife. So therefore, right, those bad thoughts, those sinful thoughts that come to him when he's with his wife, what happens is that causes damage to the neshama, the soul of his son, and the son will come out with an evil neshama, from side of evil, right? So we see right from there that a person has to be very careful how he thinks also, obviously, right, when he's with his wife, because those thoughts that he has during that time of the intercourse is what makes the neshama, right, what creates the neshama of the child, the nature of the neshama, right, the essence of the neshama comes from those thoughts. So again, we see, right, that the thoughts that a person has, right, the hirhurim, that's what we call them, right, they're totally dominant in this world. What does that mean? That everything comes from those thoughts. Whatever he has thoughts in his head, that's how his life becomes. That's how his reality becomes. Right. That's how his children become. That's how his soul is altered and right and formed. It comes all from his thoughts. So we understand one thing, right? That in Judaism, the thoughts are the main essence of what a person is, even more so than his deeds, and even more so than his speech. Right. There's three different levels. We have the deeds, which are physical, speeches, which is verbal, but the thoughts, which are just in the head, this is even more crucial than all the others. That's the way it is. Teaches Zohar Kadosh something amazing over there, right? What happens is that there's an actual story, as we know, that when Yaakov Avinu got married, the first night, right, Lavan, Harasha, he switched him and he gave him Leah instead of Rachel. We all know the story. We heard the story before. So what happened was, right, that when that first night when he was with his wife, he thought it was Rachel, but it was really Leah. So what happened was, right, that this caused damage to the son, Reuven, which came from that procreation. He came from the procreation. It was Ben Temurah. He was Ben Temurah. He was his thoughts, right, were centered on Rachel, but really he was with Leah that night. So therefore, right, caused damage to Reuven, and this is the reason why he sinned Reuven in the end, right? There's different versions of what he did exactly there, how he sinned, but the point is, right, that he sinned, and this is what caused it to him, because right, and who did this? Who caused this whole thing? Lavan or Rasha, right? This was his intention. His intention was to cause damage to the children of Yaakov, because he knew the 12 tribes were supposed to come from Yaakov, right? And therefore he wanted to damage them. That they shouldn't be too holy. They shouldn't be so pure and holy. This was the intention of Lavan and Rasha, right? So the interesting thing is like this, right? That even though Reuben sinned, but in the end, right, what does the pasuk tell us? That he was included in the tribes. He wasn't excluded. He wasn't thrown out. He wasn't excommunicated from the tribes. So the question is, why not, right? What's the reason why? So it says Zohar Kadosh something amazing, right? That even though Yaakov Avinu did damage to his son by having thoughts about the wrong woman, but the bottom line is, right, that this was not intentionally from his side, right? He didn't know. He was misled. He was fooled. He was tricked, right? So since he was tricked and his thoughts were honest, so on the one hand, right, since he was thinking about the wrong person, the wrong woman, it caused damage. But since he was being honest and he wasn't thinking to be sinful and he wasn't doing it on purpose intentionally, so therefore, right, this is why Reuben wasn't excluded altogether from the tribes. Because otherwise, he would have been excluded altogether if he was really, right, the sinful thoughts that he had, Yaakov Avinu, were intentional. This would have totally damaged Reuben, right, in a way which cannot be repaired. So we see from there, Rabbi, that everything goes according to the way you think. And says Zohar Kadosh something amazing, right? That a person who has good thoughts and is always watching himself, right, monitoring his mind, to have good thoughts, whether it's right during the Torah study, whether it's during the prayers, right? He has to be thinking good things about the prayers as well. That means you have to have concentration during the prayers, not be thinking about something else, some other mundane things which come into your head. You got to block them out. That's what a person has to do. And when he's studying Torah also, right, he has to make sure that he's not diverting to other things, other mundane things, or even dirty things, right, sinful things. He's not mixing these things together in one pile, right? So a person has to be very, very careful the way he thinks all day through, right? And if a person, says the Rakadosh, if a person is very careful about having good thoughts, what happens is that he connects to the side of good. He connects with the side of holiness, and his neshama becomes very, very strengthened. He becomes attached to the tree of life, and therefore, right, he's zoche. He merits now to get all the abundance, spiritual and physical abundance. It makes him wealthy. It makes him wise. It makes him successful. Right? Everything comes from the side of the good, and nothing from the side of the bad. So all this depends on one thing, right? The way you think. So a person has to know that if a person is having problems with these issues about having sinful thoughts and bad thoughts, so the Chazal tell us that the best way to avoid this is to get married, right? If a person is single and he's not not getting not interested in getting married, not interested in finding a shidduch, so what happens is, right, that the sinful thoughts overcome him like this. So what happens to a person who can't get married right now for some reason? He can't find his shidduch, he can't find his wife. So what happens is, it says the Torah, right, that what should he do? He should study Torah, because the Torah is the only thing that can prevent a person from having sinful thoughts, especially when he's single and he's not married, right? So it's either this or that, right? If he doesn't have marriage, he doesn't have a right. He's not married yet. So all the more so, right? He has to attach himself to Torah, and this is what causes him, right, to divert his thoughts from sinful ideas, mundane ideas, and go into the side of the holy. So even if a person doesn't have a wife, he still can, right, alleviate this problem by studying Torah. Baruch Adonai Leolam. Amen. Amen. Chazaku Baruch.